This is Colliderscope. I'm Caitlin Shore, and today I'm here with Dr. Ravindran Kumaran, a team leader and collaborations manager at Abcam. Before that, he studied Parkinson's disease at the National Institutes of Health for nearly a decade. Hi, Kumaran. Great to see you.
Hi, Caitlin. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Sure. I'd love to hear how you got here. Maybe take me back to the beginning of your career in science and just what your experience of community was during that period of your life.
Sure, yeah. So I've always enjoyed science when I was going through school and everything, and I did my undergraduate degree in neuroscience as well.
Me too.
And after that, a small world, right? Yeah. And then after that, I got a job at a brain bank, actually, in London. So the Queen Square Brain Bank in London, where I was basically researching Parkinson's disease brains, so brains that had been donated by patients with Parkinson's disease and often their spouses, so that would be the control healthy brain. And then during my time doing research, I just became fascinated with neurodegeneration in general and everything, and just the way in which we can kind of move forward and study diseases, with the idea that what we're doing is going to find a cure or going to find a treatment that we can help improve people's lives. And then while working there, I started to do a PhD, so continued there. The reason I did the PhD there is because I just really loved the interdisciplinary nature of the work. So where I worked was there were clinicians, there were pathologists, there were medical biologists, geneticists, people from all aspects of science, and you're studying different aspects of the disease and you're trying to bring together the knowledge from what you see in the clinic to what we see under a microscope. I totally enjoyed it. And then after my PhD, I really liked the environment that they had set up at the NIH. So I came there for my postdoc, and I did an extended postdoc, and then stayed for a bit longer as a research fellow.
Do you feel like have there been any instances where like a personality or a social connection crucially changed the way your career went or your focus went?
Yeah, I think so. I think during one of my early projects at the NIH, it didn't go too well. I spent a few years working on it and everything, and I was quite down. And at that point, I was thinking of walking away just because the data wasn't producing what we expected, and time, money had been invested and everything like that. You become a little bit disillusioned.
Could you talk a little bit more about what you were studying and what wasn't working?
Sure. So in the research field of Parkinson's disease, there's a theory that this gene protein, alpha-synuclein, is toxic. So too much of it causes toxicity and cell death. So the idea that we had as a group was to see if we could find out other proteins that would kind of either suppress the toxicity or exacerbate the toxicity. So, again, being in a genetics lab, it was trying to look at all the genes in the body using this particular model, and then seeing if anything that came out of it would match up with some of the human genetics data, and that way could we narrow down which gene in a locus was responsible for the disease, for Parkinson's disease. And so we built a model, but we couldn't actually get the effect that we wanted. The cells weren't dying, they, even though we had kind of ramped up the expression of this toxic gene. And then eventually we ended up doing a few more studies, and we found actually that the greatest effect we're seeing on the cells is through the mechanism that we use to induce the expression. So there's a chemical compound that's added, and just having that chemical compound changes the nature of the cells. So it basically meant that the 2 years that we had spent building the model, characterizing the model, was useless, and we couldn't go forward with the project.
Woof.
So at that point, it's basically terminate the project. Really, and back to the drawing board. What do we do next? And I remember there being a staff scientist in the lab, and just her general enthusiasm for science. Right, it was quite contagious. She took the time to sit with me and just have open-ended discussions and everything, helped kind of get the juices flowing again, right? So with the creative juices flowing again.
Do you remember what types of things that coworker said to you?
Yeah, more than the actual words, I kind of remember the message and the feelings it conveyed, and it was a series of conversations over a month or 2 months and everything, because obviously it takes time. So there's the initial kind of conversations around, okay, what do you have? What can we do with what you had? Is there another way to look at it? And so she offered up her time and her support to do that. She actually used to work next to me on the lab, so a lot of the conversations would be while we're at the lab bench, doing experiments and things like that, and you're just talking in general conversations, and then just through spitballing the idea of kind of combining something that she'd got from this other collaborator with some of the previous technologies and models that I had built and used kind of came together. It kind of just plants a few seeds, and as with any seeds, you go home, you sleep on it. A week later or 2 weeks later, you're just like, well, why don't you share that with me? Let me try them. Let me put them on the cells. Let me see if it does something. And actually, that was really influential, because when we did that, it was like, oh yeah, this would really be good. It meets an unmet need kind of thing. There is this unanswered question about this process. So what do we want to do next? The project started to gain traction. And I think if it hadn't been for her and the other people actually in the lab who recognize what you've done before and helped you kind of just think a little bit outside of that box. I mean, it's easy to become depressed, anxious, everything like that in science when things don't go your way. And it is the support that you have around you, that your immediate community that kind of raise you up and help you question possible bad choices at the end of the day, right? And so she acted like, she was a counsellor at the beginning, but then she became a sounding board at the end, someone that I could, just run ideas off. And it wasn't just her, it was like multiple people in the group. But I think I just vividly remember her having a positive impact on me, and, that the love that kind of was conveyed throughout that whole process and everything,
So it sounds like a lot of positivity, empathy, encouragement, and fibrils.
It's what your best friend would do when you're going through a breakup, right? It's very similar things, and those kind of life skills are easily transferred into when you're down in the dumps in the lab.
Totally.
At the end of the day.
And I could see that almost being like a potential turning point, where either that's the point where you realize this isn't for me, I can't do science, period, as versus, in science, there is a supportive community that has my back, and I can totally do this because of the people I'm doing it with.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think at that point, the thought of walking away certainly crossed my mind. I was evaluating what my next steps would be. Should I leave the bench? Should I look elsewhere for my next career move? And whilst I've always appreciated kind of collaborations and everything like that, I think this was the first time I really appreciated kind of the community. And I think when I use the word community, it's almost like a family, really. And that's that support network that they provide outside of the intellectual support. It's all those different other elements outside kind of just progressing your individual research project and offering those kind of scientific insights. So I think she definitely helped me prolong my career at the bench and kind of shift my approach to doing work, where I became more collaborative, I became more receptive to working with others, and actually realised that the thing I enjoyed about science was working with others, that kind of camaraderie. There's many things that you love and you find joy in when it comes to working with science, but for me personally, I love that, and I think my purpose even kind of shifted a little bit. Like, I became a bit more of a facilitator. I started working on more people's projects because I wanted to be involved with other people's work. I wanted to support them and everything. And I think it was probably quite a pivotal moment actually in my career, but also my growth as a person. And so I guess even though I've left, academic research, government research, etc., I'm always grateful for the support and the love that they showed during that time.
Yeah, I feel like especially people outside of the sciences tend to think of it as completely ration and logic driven and really about some intellectual goal, and everything proceeds from there. And they don't necessarily think about the social forces underlying how things really get done. Do you think that those values, sort of like softer skills in the science, do you think those are valued enough, those skills?
I don't think they are. I think when you think of science, it's like you said, right? It's about being rational. It's about removing emotions from it, just looking at the data and helping that drive. And I mean, there is an element of that, and that should help drive decisions and help move things forward. But it is the softer skills, the communication, the empathy, the emotions that are shared amongst the group, which actually also help push things forward. I mean, I think to be a scientist, you need to be resilient, you need to be agile, you need to persevere, and those things are built and are shared amongst the team through and come across through the softer skills, really. So I 100% agree with that. I don't think without softer skills, which are often overlooked, we would be where we are today. The scientific breakthroughs that have happened, they would not be there.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you consider like built into the scientific process is chronic failure, right?
Yes.
You fail and fail and fail until you succeed. And I could imagine, like in your scenario, that could be pretty demoralizing. Mm-hmm. And if you're not necessarily, if you don't have the right emotional support, that can lead to loss of talent or loss of, potential discovery. I wonder, how do you think that we could kind of incentivize those skills to be more rewarded or incorporated into training?
Ooh, it's a tough question, actually. I have to think a little bit about that.
I don't expect you to solve that problem, but...
Yeah. I think there's a lot of individual personalities there that come into play with these softer skills. So I think having a slightly larger group, so I think small labs may struggle with that because sometimes the strong personality is the one that dominates, and it becomes a bit difficult. So just making sure that you have different groups communicating with each other and building those bonds is really there. Removing it a bit from the science and making it more human, I think that, organizations could do that. And there's training as well, right? I think it's exposure to the idea that it's okay to fail, exposure to ways of dealing with people who are struggling, because everybody struggles in science, so that there could certainly be some sort of mental health program associated with that, and having people talk about it, putting it out there in the open that actually, you need to fail 10 times to be successful that 11th time or something like that, and people talking through that, I think kind of makes that concept acceptable.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to shift a little bit and just hear about some of the either like barriers to collaboration in those contexts that you've experienced.
I think there's who you know and exposure to people in the field. As a scientist, you can sometimes have a very narrow view of what goes on in your field, and the more you broaden it, the more you identify new people that you want to work with. And then I would also say sometimes egos can come into play. Science is very competitive. People don't often want to share sometimes. They don't want to share thoughts, ideas, or lab time, lab resources, etc. So that can be quite a big hindrance. I think especially in the past there was a lot of because of the competition. It was about who is first. Because I think it goes back to the first point about money. If your name is on the paper, you become associated with that, and it's a little bit easier to get the funding. So it's kind of a bit of a vicious cycle sometimes. Yeah. But even outside of that, I think egos can definitely play a big part.
How do you get over that, right? So, I mean, I feel like there's an inherent tension between the fact that probably the more that you collaborate as scientists, the more likely you are to solve the big problem, right? Mm-hmm. But one might be hesitant to collaborate if it feels like, well, no, then what? This guy might get all the credit or get to the thing before me. So did you ever worry about being scooped by one of your collaborators or someone you're talking to?
At some point, you kind of realize that you can't do it all on your own. So, you want to kind of bring in people around you to help you out. Big science, global science, alliances, partnerships, collaborations, they're all a thing now. Mm-hmm. You hear about them. I mean, gone are the days of, one or two people being on a paper. Now you have 50, 100, and so forth. It's international operations, really. And, shared ownership, shared authorship, shared glory is becoming more and more of a thing. And I think it's been recognized by the institutions as well when it comes to looking for jobs, looking for funding as well. Actually, it doesn't matter where you were on the paper, what did you contribute to the paper? That's the main thing now. And it becomes almost a little bit of like, if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, so not only are they helping further your work and they're on your paper, you then eventually help them out and you become on their paper. So eventually it's kind of a win-win. You've doubled kind of your output, and what your publication record as well goes up as well. So
papers for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, if only, right? But yes, that's exactly what it's like. And also I think you realize your limitations as well, right? Science has grown so much in the last 50 years. So many new techniques are available, and equipment costs money, and a vast amount of training is needed for a lot of these techniques. So in order to get a good publication, you realize that you need to tell a fuller story, and you can only do that by approaching it from different angles, and this is where really collaborating and bringing in external help actually helps do that.
How does that overlap with kind of just like the social side of science and life? Like, is there a degree to which people are kind of looser with ideas? Like, they might propose things that are a little bit crazier, or like that they wouldn't propose in a more like buttoned up academic setting?
Yeah, 100%. I think if you go to in an academic setting, you're visiting, or you run into each other for a purpose, right? At a social, there is no real purpose to it apart from having fun, letting off a bit of steam, bringing people that have known each other over the years together, and then the people in their labs meeting each other, and in networking and things like that. So it's just like being at a party. You naturally talk to people, and conversations just kind of flourish, really, right? I think any way you can put people together helps. Another conference had line dancing, and I never line danced before, but it's a very American thing apparently. So while we're line dancing, you're with a couple of partners, and then naturally you just start talking, and then afterwards I remember having a conversation about somebody else's project, and it didn't lead to a collaboration, but I think I kind of offered some insights into the work that she was doing, which she found very useful.
Just for my reference, what conference had line dancing at it?
It was one of these Gordon research conferences, and the focus was on Parkinson's disease. The evening social they hired someone to come teach everybody line dancing.
Amazing.
So, it was great actually. I didn't think I'd like it, but it's great.
Yeah, you get people moving. Maybe they're in a different mindset. They're more loose, and
the awkwardness kind of goes, right? So you're a bit awkward at the beginning, and then after you've like fallen over a few times, bumped into everyone, it's like, okay, whatever.
You've seen me line dancing.
Exactly.
I guess you can see my data now.
It can't get more embarrassing.
Exactly. So I want to take me back to you're at NIH. A very prestigious place to work. Eventually you get out of that initial rut. What led to the decision to leave and eventually go to Abcam?
So I think basically I enjoyed science. When it came to the end, I looked at kind of the pros and cons of doing research, really. During my PhD, I always thought, oh God, I wish we had more money, and money solves science. And then I went to the NIH, and there's loads of money there, and it doesn't, it solves some problems, and there's many other problems that kind of materialize. And so I was assessing what I would like to do. And for me, it was to step into something that was more of a team science, really. But it was the ability to continue collaborating and partnering within the neuroscience space, and the fact that I could work with organizations like Michael J. Fox, who are at the front of PD research, who are pushing boundaries there, and ensuring that what we have out there is fit for purpose. That kind of really sold it to me, actually. And so that actually helped me step away from research. And Abcam provided the opportunity to kind of help push and promote science from a different angle. Rather than actually doing the research, I would address some of the frustrations I saw in research by making sure the correct tools were there for people to use.
Can you tell me a little bit about those frustrations?
So I work at the NIH. A lot of the work that was done there was on kind of identifying new genes that were associated with Parkinson's or Alzheimer's or ALS or other neurodegenerative or disorders. So everything you're doing is with its limitations. So that was kind of the main frustration that I felt that, okay, I found this exciting thing, I really want to work on it. How do I do it?
Yeah.
And that's something I try to address now on being at Abcam. You know, on the collaboration side, I go out there, go to conferences, and I will speak to someone who was like me and said, okay, what was the new thing you found? Do you have that, what you need to study it? And if they say no, then we will look at it and we'll say, okay, I can help you out.
Great. So let's rewind a little bit. I'd love to hear a little bit about your work, what you do.
Sure, yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm a scientific team leader and collaborations manager. I sit within our new product development unit at Abcam. And basically what that involves is overseeing the development of new products that we launch, so antibodies, cell lines, proteins, tools that the scientific community will use in producing their papers and research data. An element of that actually involves working with externals, so organizations, institutes, funding bodies as well, to make sure that what we make is fit for purpose, of high quality, and helps their needs.
You mentioned the Michael J. Fox Foundation, and I feel like that kind of gets you into a whole different communities. Then you're in the nonprofit space, but you're also in, dealing with celebrity. And what's that like?
I have nothing but admiration for Michael J. Fox Foundation, and in many ways, the way I think they've shifted kind of the way science can be done. I think they're a relatively young organization if you compare them to some of the older Alzheimer's disease charities or Parkinson's disease charities. They kind of came with the idea that they wanted to spend everything to cure Parkinson's disease, and of course they've got the name Michael J. Fox. They've got this famous actor behind them, and that kind of helped raise awareness and bring in funds. And what I really like about them is the fact that actually they would consider moonshot projects. If you can make a pitch. They didn't want to play it safe. They fund regular projects, but they would often fund these grand schemes. A lot of the advancements, I think, in the genetic space of Parkinson's disease was brought about because Michael J. Fox were willing to fund it. So that kind of no fear and there's no restrictions, I think is a wonderful thing, actually. And they have patient advocacy groups, they have clinicians, they have, I guess, all the corporate support behind them. And so they brought many new elements kind of into the ecosystem of doing science, really, rather than just kind of traditional government or traditional organizations.
So it sounds like your art, because you did a lot of collaborations and you kind of got to this point in your career where you were down, and then via scientific community at like the real personal level, your immediate community lifted you up, kept you in the sciences, thank goodness. But it also feel like that moment may have played a role in leading you to a life beyond the traditional scientific community. You said you sort of recognized that people were part of the reason that you enjoyed it, and eventually led to your current role at Abcam. Just wondering, do you have any closing thoughts on the role of community in science?
Yeah, I think community is invaluable. I think the more that you foster a strong community, the more you will progress, not only professionally, but also personally as well. Like I said, I think I went through a moment during that period of time, and I think I grew quite a bit. It helped me assess my life, my career, and everything. And I think it also helps bring out, at least for me, the joy of science, right? I think, having the people around you when times are tough actually reminds you actually there's other great things going on around you, which helps you to be resilient, helps you to be agile, helps you to persevere and push through for that next breakthrough. So community is absolutely critical to the success of science and the furtherment of science, I believe.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Kumaran.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's lovely.
Thanks for listening to Colliderscope. Science happens because of community, and progress happens together. To learn more about how you can progress with Abcam, visit abcam.com.